A routine Ansible deployment just broke authentication to your production database. The error: fatal, password authentication failed for user app. The root cause: a missing variable in include role silently overwrote your vaulted password with the default changeme. Stick around, and I'll show you exactly why this happens and how to prevent it. Welcome to TheCodeForge. Before we dig into that production issue, let's cover Ansible Lint testing. Ansible Linting uses tools like Ansible Lint and yamllint to statically analyze your code for syntax errors, best practice violations, and security issues. Molecule is a testing framework that provisions a container, applies your role, runs verification tests, and tears down the environment, all in an isolated, repeatable way. Ansible Lint profiles group rules by severity. The default min profile only checks syntax errors. The production profile is the strictest. It includes rules like name missing, no changed when, and FQCM built-ins. In CI, you should use the production profile to enforce production-ready code. Here's a sample Ansible Lint file that sets the profile to production and skips or warns on certain rules. You can also pass profile production via CLI. YAML is notoriously error-prone. YAMLLint catches issues like mixed tabs and spaces, wrong indentation, and line length violations. A real incident: a junior engineer committed a playbook with mixed tabs and spaces. It worked locally but failed in CI because the CI runner's YAML parser was stricter. YAMLLint caught it instantly. Here's a typical YAMLLint config. We set line length max to 120, enforce two-space indentation, and disable the truthy rule since Ansible uses true and false. Molecule with the Docker driver is the go-to for CI testing. It uses pre-built images with Ansible installed, so test runs are fast. The lifecycle includes create, converge, verify, and destroy. You can also test multiple OS families by defining multiple platforms. This is a basic molecule, YAML for the Docker driver. Note pre-build image, true. Without it, Molecule would build the image from scratch every time, taking 5 minutes. Always use pre-built images. Testinfra is a Python framework for writing verification tests. You can check that a service is running, a file exists with specific content, or a socket is listening. Tests are fast and can be parametrized for multiple OSes. Here are 3 Testinfra tests. One checks that Nginx is running and enabled, another checks the config file exists and contains a specific line, and the third checks that Nginx is listening on port 80. If you prefer Ansible syntax, you can use the Ansible verifier. You write a verify YAML playbook that runs tasks to check state. This is useful when you need to use modules like URI or MySQL query. This verify YAML playbook checks that Nginx is installed and the service is running and enabled. Using check mode and failed when ensures the test fails if the role would make changes. In CI, always run lint before test to fail fast. Separate lint and test jobs run in parallel. Pin tool versions in requirements, txt to avoid environment discrepancies. Cache Docker images to speed up pulls. This GitHub Actions workflow runs lint and test in separate jobs. The test job depends on lint passing. This ensures that syntax and style issues are caught before spending time on container provisioning. Here are the most common Ansible Lint violations. Missing task names make playbooks unreadable. Missing changed when breaks idempotency. Not using FQCN can lead to module shadowing. Using shell instead of command introduces injection risks. These tasks show common violations. The apt task lacks changed when, the restart uses command instead of service, and the copy doesn't specify a mode. Ansible Lint would flag all of these with the production profile. Molecule scenarios allow you to test different configurations, for example, different OS families or variable sets. Each scenario has its own molecule, YAML and tests directory. You can override variables in the scenario's molecule YAML. This molecule, YAML, defines 2 platforms, Ubuntu 22.04 and CentOS 8. Molecule will run tests in parallel against both. This catches OS-specific bugs like package name differences. Molecule supports advanced features like the delegated driver for testing against existing VMs, dependency management via requirements, YAML, and pre-post tasks for environment setup and cleanup. These are useful for integration tests that mirror production. This config uses the delegated driver to test against localhost, with a requirements file for dependencies and custom prepare cleanup playbooks. This is useful for testing against a staging VM. The profile key in Ansible Lint was introduced in Ansible Lint 6.0.0. If you use an older version, e.g. 5x, the profile key is ignored and you must use skip list/warn list directly. Pin Ansible Lint greater or equal 6, 0, 0 in requirements, txt to ensure profile support. The article mentions idempotency testing, but only shows an Ansible verifier approach. Here's a concrete Testinfra snippet that runs the role again via host, Ansible, and asserts no changes. Note: host, Ansible is experimental and may require Ansible Python package installed in the test container. When running Molecule in CI, e.g. GitHub Actions, the Docker socket must be accessible. If using Docker in Docker or a runner without the Docker group, you may need to mount the socket explicitly. vvar/run/docker, sock/var/run/docker, sock. Also ensure the container user has permission to access the socket. Otherwise, Molecule create fails with a connection error. When Molecule test fails, use debug to see full Ansible output. Run each phase separately to isolate the issue. Use Molecule login to get a shell in the container and inspect state manually. Logs are stored in ~cache/molecule. These commands help debug Molecule failures. Run converge with verbose output, list instances, login to inspect, run a specific test with debug, and destroy when done. Idempotency is critical. Run Molecule converge twice. The second run should report 0 changes. You can automate this with a verify test that runs the role again and asserts no changes. This converge, YAML includes the role twice. The second run registers the result and fails if any changes occurred. This catches tasks that always report changed. Sometimes you need to ignore a rule intentionally. Use #noca with a comment explaining why. For team-specific policies, write custom Ansible Lint rules in Python. For example, a rule that enforces all file tasks have owner and group set. This custom rule checks that every app task has update cache. Yes, add it to Ansible Lint with rules. This is the same issue we highlighted at the start. Here's exactly why that happened. The role had a vars/main, YAML with a default DB password of changeme. The playbook used include role with vars, but forgot to pass DB password, so the default was used, overwriting the vaulted value. The database rejected the connection. The fix was to add an argument spec for the role with private, true for DB password. This makes Ansible Lint's safety profile flag the missing variable. We also added an assert task that fails if DB password equals changeme. Now, if the password isn't provided, the role fails early. Never put default values for secrets in vars/main YAML. If a playbook forgets to pass the variable, the default is used, and in this case, it was changeme, causing a production authentication failure. When debugging, start with verbose lint output. Use Molecule login to get a shell in the container. Check that Docker is running and that your test hostname matches the container name. Let's run through some common interview questions. What is the difference between min and production profiles? Min checks syntax only. Production includes all safety rules plus name missing, no changed when, FQC and built-ins. How do you test a role against multiple distros? Define multiple platforms in Molecule, YAML with different images. What is the purpose of pre-build image? True, uses a pre-built image with Ansible installed, avoiding build time. And a few frequently asked questions. What's the difference between Ansible Lint and yamllint? Ansible Lint checks Ansible constructs. Yamllint checks YAML syntax. Can I use Molecule with Podman? Yes, Molecule supports Podman, Vagrant, Elastic Compute Cloud, and more. How do I test services with systemed? Use a Docker image with systemed and add privileged, true, and cgroup volume mounts. To wrap up, always use the production profile in CI, Enforce YAML style with YAMLLint. Use molecule with Docker for fast, isolated testing. Test idempotency by running converge twice, and pin your tool versions. These practices will catch issues early and keep your deployment safe. Ready to go deeper? Up next, Ansible Windows Automation, then Ansible Network Automation. Find them all at TheCodeForge.io. Thanks for watching. The full article and code examples are covered in detail at TheCodeForge.io.